Afternoon, one and all, to a further discussion. A lot of talking happens at MardiGrass here. We're going to keep going. A conversation between a couple of Johns. John Jiggens is a historian, cannabis historian, I suppose, is probably how we would like to describe himself. Citizen journalist, I think, is another description he will answer to. Long-time activist around cannabis law reform, long-time person of with significant interest in writing around the history of cannabis in Australia. Some interesting books in John's back catalogue. The other John is John Shipton, the father of Julian Assange, someone who perhaps by virtue of that circumstances had activism thrust upon him, has become an activist and an advocate for human rights in general terms, as well in broad terms, as well as for the dealing with the persecution of his son Julian. So John and John will be in conversation. The session is described officially, whatever that means at MardiGrass, as with the topic Unipolarity, BRICS, Opium as a Weapon, and the Release of Julian Assange. I'm sure we'll range much further than that.
All right, well, I think, is it working? I guess it is working. Okay, look, what I'm going to do is ask John about the BRICS thing and about opium as a weapon. I'll leave all those questions about Julian Assange, about what John's doing himself to you, because I'm sure you'll all enjoy asking questions. So I guess we'll sort of start off with that. In 2024, John went to the BRICS conference, which is the BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, which is an alternative economic alliance. And John can talk about that. And he also visited, the countries around Kazan. So, yeah, John, you want to start off by talking about BRICS and your trip to Kazan?
Where to start? Good afternoon, everybody. Well, Kazan's a fabulous place. It has a Kremlin about the same size as the Moscow Kremlin. It has within it a mosque and an Orthodox church. They do allow people in to wander out and have a look. Kazan is a medium-sized Russian city. It's quite in the center of Russia and is consequently considered more or less invulnerable to attack from drones and so on. Although the week after we left there, a drone flew into one of the high-rise buildings. So I think making the point that nowhere in Russia is free from attack. The BRICS itself, there were 20,000 delegates there. In what they call the jail, there were 2,000 journalists. We weren't in there. We were allowed to wander around the place, so we didn't get locked up. There are a great many famous journalists there: Pepe Escobar, George Galloway, and so on. And they're all gathered together, and they more or less swap information as to who to speak to get the lowdown. With 20,000 delegates, the big discussion was M-Bridge. BRICS Bridge, if you like, M-Bridge currently. So it is a payment gateway that duplicates the work of SWIFT, but allows payments to be made in your own currency. So a currency swap. So if Australia buys something from Moscow, from Russia, then it can pay in dollars rather than converting, can pay in Oz dollars rather than converting Oz dollars into American dollars and then paying in American dollars. So this reduces the capacity of the United States to use the leverage of the financial system to get political and economical benefits. And so the coming one is called BRICS Bridge, but the current one is called M-Bridge, and China and Russia run M-Bridge together, China foremost, and it's on the blockchain. So it uses the same technology as Bitcoin and all the other crypto coins. It's really important understanding. Just an aside, I got a message from the ABC that would I be available for an interview. I said, okay, I'll meet you down at the coffee shop in downtown Kazan. So I went down there and sent her a note that I was there waiting. No hurry, come when you like. She said, I'm sorry, I'm in Taiwan. And so we had two representatives from Australia there. There was me and Adrian McRae. Adrian McRae is a councillor from Port Hedland in Western Australia.
All right. Well, I guess we'll talk about the question of opium and its use as an offensive weapon. That used to be my area of academic expertise, was the world drug trade, and I've written one encyclopedia article on the world drug trade. And when you study the world drug trade, the basic dynamism of it is it used to flow from third world countries to the rich countries of the first world, so that you find drugs would come up from Colombia, cross through Mexico, go to the US, or they'd start off in Indochina and flow to the US. So it's the countries which have money to which the drug trade flows, and it flows along very much a sort of criminal network. With the Americans, if you follow American wars of the 20th and 21st century, the opium trade follows US wars across Eurasia. In the 1970s, when the Vietnam War is on, 70% of the opium and heroin is coming from the Golden Triangle. And then when the Afghan war starts up, Afghanistan becomes the center of the opium trade, and it's built up to something like 93% of the global opium production is coming from Afghanistan in 2007. Anyway, well, John's there, he sort of learned, and I suppose I should say, if you look at China's century of humiliation, that starts with the Opium Wars, the first Opium War in 1839. There's the second Opium War in 1855. The British fight these wars for free trade in opium. The Chinese are trying to ban opium, and one official in Canton destroys a whole lot of opium. The British and the opium traders, who are members of British Parliament, organised this huge British invasion, which is the beginning of that century of humiliation for China. Anyway, John had some interesting observations about this, John?
I take a different view of the history of the drug trade than John, but it doesn't mean to say that each excludes the other. It's just that each is distinct in its perspective. Right. I take it that it's a policy of government that the opium trade is instituted. In the case of China, China insisted that anybody that's buying its products pay in silver, specie it's called. This drained from the United States and the United Kingdom all the silver, to the extent that they began to worry about the amount of silver left in their vaults. So they embarked upon what was called, what we call opium wars, what in China we'll call just wars. In the first war and the second war combined to do this, to force China to accept opium as payment, and in the second case, to legalize opium. So it went from 2,000 tons a year coming in from India under the auspices of I forget the name of the company. No, it's another one. But anyway, under the auspices of British and American-owned companies, okay, they forced China to accept opium as a payment. Secondly, they forced China to legalize the distribution within China and the consumption of opium. It resulted in China producing for itself within 10 years 34,000 tons per annum of opium, and 60% of the male population thereby using. I won't say addicted, they're users, okay? 60% of the males, 34,000 tons of opium per annum, to the extent that it bankrupted the Indian farmers because they couldn't produce opium at the same price that the Chinese farmers could. This is a policy of government. A policy instrument has to be created. Money has to be allocated. Bureaucrats have to be formed. Committees formed. Committees report to Parliament. This is a deliberate policy of debauchement of the population of China in order to strip their resources and dominate that country. This is without argument. We now move forward a bit. 1991. The amount of opium going into Russia is zero. It has a border with Afghanistan. It's zero. There's none. Just in the sense of sociological phenomenon and regulations. There isn't any. It goes up to 70 tons within months. This has to be facilitated. First of all, you have to encourage people to grow the stuff. There has to be a reward for growing it. There has to be labs set up to convert the opium into heroin. They have to have distribution networks, which in fact were set up in Georgia. Georgia, because a lot of the Georgian mafia had influences in the oblasts of Russia. Okay, the oblasts are the town councils. So the Georgian mafia, after the dissolving of the USSR, were very, very powerful. In fact, prior to, from say 1988 onwards, the Georgian mafia flourished. It was quite a problem in the USSR. After the collapse, it became an avenue for the importation and distribution of Afghanistani opium into Russia in order to debauch the Russian populace. It was a policy. It required committees. It required allocations of funds. It required redirection of US aid funds. US aid funds for NGOs to encourage to install watering, for example, so that the opium crop would grow. All of these things require supervision, bureaucracies, meetings, allocations of funds, reports on success, and so on. It is a policy and continues to be. I'll stress that. It continues to be a policy of the United Kingdom to use drugs as a means of debauching their enemies or weakening the institutions of state so that they can purloin the resources of those target nations. It's unforgettable. It's been repeated time and time again, and it's there in front of us again. So Odessa is an avenue into the Ukraine for addictive substances, and an avenue out of Ukraine for the trafficking of children and women and organs. So the United Nations last year reported in the United Nations in the year before last, reported that over the 10-year period, 332,000 women and children had been trafficked, exported via Odessa out of the Ukraine. This requires organisation. It requires means. It requires meetings. It requires populace, people it requires banks to handle the money and distribute the money. It's all known. Australia's put $1 billion into Ukraine.
All right. And I guess I'll just add to that the Americans become really involved with, I guess, the drug trade in the 1940s when they need the help of the mafia to invade Sicily. And that's when the sort of deal between the CIA, or what becomes the CIA, at that time it's called the OSS, the Office for Strategic Studies. The CIA comes into existence in 1947. It starts that sort of policy where you have what's called the deep state, but it's the it's the military industrial intelligentsia, which is involved with the drug trade and sort of attempts to keep that knowledge hidden. But during the Vietnam War, Australia becomes the centre for the heroin trade, because at that stage the drugs are coming from Thailand, the Golden Triangle, into the US, and because of R&R, rest and recreation, they discover it's much easier to smuggle drugs like marijuana and heroin from Australia. So they actually shifted to Australia, and the instrument they use is called the Nimbin Bank, which a lot of people might be aware of. So you do have this sort of, I guess, close bond between the Five Eyes and organised crime. Anyway, do you want to say any more on that, John, or should I get people to ask questions? Okay, John, can comment on that.
So the flows of money, huge. In the 2008 banking collapse, as you all may remember or read since, the banks in the United States were on the verge of collapse. What saved them is one particular bank which handled the cash from the Mexican drug trade. $800 million in cash were called in. That particular bank is 12% owned by Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway is a reinsurer. It's mostly owned by a fellow called Sparkles. Well, I call him Sparkles Buffett. Warren Buffett is a very old man who's praised up to the sky for being an astute investor. Well, that's the true story. It facilitates the movement of money for the drug trade between Mexico and the United States. So this can only happen. Now, it was reported by a man named Webb, who suicided after his report was published in the Los Angeles Times. His suicide was interesting in as much as he shot himself in the head twice. The London banks that are concerned with this trade are part and parcel. I mean, I've sat at dinner with these people, you know, in agitating or trying to find contacts for Julian's release, and they're very good dinner companions. You know, one particular story. I won't say the man's name. He was Lord something or other. He loves fox hunting. To pay his fox hunting fees, he used to work before retirement for the Colonial Foreign Office. The Colonial Foreign Office is a resource encyclopedia that was started in 1496 by the Hacklock brothers. James Cook, and John will add commentary to this, which is interesting. James Cook is part of the recording of resources from around the world, which the English were in the habit of doing from 1496 onwards. Anyway, my dinner companion makes his extra money by selling information that's recorded in the Colonial and Foreign Office files to Israeli blood diamond billionaires or cobalt billionaires or lithium billionaires or something. That's how he made. But it's the most charming companion and great to walk along and have a chat to, and so helpful. Oh, John, I would suggest that I can't give you the exact contact, dear boy, but if you make yourself known at this club, or if you go there, I'm sure that you'll find a way to meet him. He always sits in the corner there. You'll notice him. He's got a blah, blah, blah. So, an extraordinary phenomenon. Also, I had just a bit more gossip. Just a spice thing. Don't you love high octane gossip? Dear, it's wonderful. Anyway, I was staying with somebody in a big house, and he had to go out for dinner. He said, I'm expecting my father over. Now, his father was equerry to the last Governor General of Australia, the last English Governor General of Australia. Equerry just means that he's an MI6 brilliant, whatever. So I sit down with this old fellow, and he says, John, how is it that you've allowed all those people into Australia? Racist old dickhead. But anyway, I mean, I just replied, there's nothing to do with me. And have you been to London lately? That's the circumstance, you know, that the English produced for us a relationship between the sovereign and the people, guarded by law at Runnymede. You might know it's 800 years ago. Now, that is a world treasure, you know, because there has to be laws between the sovereign, the state, and the people, and the sovereign must obey those laws. And this was introduced into the Western Code and the World Code by the English 800 years ago. So it's not all bad, but in thinking about the drug trade, don't look at the surface. It's organized. They have meetings. They allocate personnel. The personnel form committees. The committees report on their success. If there's disharmony in a committee, then the committee member is replaced or it's evened out. It's civilized and organized and has a particular aim, money and weakening your opponent's resolve. Thank you.
Okay. Have we got another microphone? We have, because we should. I think it's about time to have a question.
Sure. I mean, we never.
All right. So I guess I should. I'll just. Yeah, I won't say anything more. So if you've got questions to John about what he's been talking about, or if you want to find out what's happening with Julian, or if you want to find out what John's doing next, you can ask those sorts of questions. And so anyone want to, or are you going to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got right. Best if you use the microphone, so please put your hand up and I'll enter the microphone. We're recording what you say, but also it's just much easier with the background noise, the music for people to hear.
I just wanted to ask about Julian, obviously, because I've seen that he's been released, but what is the background story and how he's doing? Because that would be like a massive change for him and for the whole family.
He went to the Pope's funeral in Rome. He sent me a picture of him with David Domino, who's the artist who did the three people standing on chairs. He looked really well. He looked happy. Yeah. What he's going to do in the future, I don't know. I hope he doesn't decide to do anything really interesting until I'm 6 feet under. You know?
Fair enough.
Anyone else got a question?
Hey everyone, John. My question is, following the global economic situation, from your position, how are you describing the narrative of Trump versus the world, and how it plays into these systems you're describing?
Yeah, that's a really good and tough question. I'm mostly interested in Australia and its independence, and that fascinates me all the time. I think about it constantly. How can we be more independent? How can we re-establish an industrial support base for ourselves? You know?
Public Postal Bank.
Maybe. Maybe, but you know, just a comment on the conditions. A condition of reindustrialization is access to money. Okay? So it's a condition. To think that conditions are going to reindustrialize Australia is just magic. It's just magic. It's a simple, if you forgive me, a repetition of the fact that the market is going to look it up. The market will recognize the necessity and then supply the goods, which is nonsense. It's just a belief in providence, you know. You know, if I have these needs, God will supply. You know, if I breathe deeply, He'll supply twice. To reindustrialize Australia, to industrialize Australia, you would need three things. First of all, you would need an understanding that it's a vertically integrated effort which involves a couple of generations of people learning how to work, learning what work is required, and establishing the institutions of state and the social institutions, educational institutions that will fulfill your agenda. One of those conditions in fulfilling the agenda is access to money. But access to money doesn't make it happen. Just one of the conditions. But my fascination is, for example, the seventh largest economy is a neighbour. You can row there. You can catch a boat across. You can get a fisherman's boat. You can go there any day. In fact, most of the flow is in the opposite direction, from Indonesia to Australia. Seventh largest economy in the world, 300 million people, just installed 147 kilometres of high-speed rail, building a new capital city. I mean, these are serious things. And they're just a full partner of BRICS. So they have access to MBridge, they have access to, when it's floated, BRICS Bridge, and they have a currency swap with China, which cuts the United States out of the running. The other day, a Russian aircraft landed in Indonesia, and it was all over the papers and news here. Oh my dear, the Russians are coming. It's absurd. If you go to Sydney, to Port Botany, you'll see Bear Island there if you're wandering around La Perouse. It's a tourist venue. And you can go and have a look at the preparations made in 1854 for the invasion of Australia by Russia. It's comical. It borders on the ridiculous. Just take, embrace fully the fact of being an Australian and how to in a scientific industrial era, how to produce the power, how to institute the education, how to institute the institutions of state to move us in that direction. If we decide that it's not the industrial scientific epoch, well, then we're a bit wrong-headed. It's not true. It is a scientific industrial epoch. China has just perfected and now making, I think the first or second, I can't remember, it's the first or second, thorium reactor. Thorium reactor produces, there's thorium, is enough thorium on the Earth to last thousands of years of generation of power, and it doesn't have a radioactive residue. These are important things to know and embrace and understand. Well, how we go. Another thing that I'd like to point out about Australia, it's the richest nation in the world. You don't feel rich? Well, let me explain. Russia is said to have between 70 and 95 trillion dollars in resources divided up amongst 140 million people. Actually, a bit more now that Donbass has joined Russia, so 150 million people. Australia has 30 trillion dollars in resources divided amongst 26 million people. Who is wealthiest? That's us. We're embraced by 7 oceans, name them: the Indian Ocean, the Great Southern Ocean, the Tasman Sea, the Pacific Ocean, the Coral Sea, Torres Strait, all of them teeming with untold riches. We're the only continent that has its own borders. We border nobody. We can look after ourselves. The submarines, this is a funny one. The submarines, because we have 7 oceans that we have to protect ourselves in, but it works the other way round, doesn't it? If we can go out under the water, that way they can come to us under the water. It's just ridiculous, some of the strategic understandings that emanate out of Canberra that we're supposed to nod our head to. The Greens and a few others now have the Echidna Defence of Australia. So, or if you want a better image, a porcupine defence or the pineapple defence. That is, you have missiles, and if somebody comes towards you, you point a missile at and say, go away. And they naturally beat it. I mean, some of the concepts of why can't we actually explore what it means to establish a missile defence of Australia, their reach, their quality, their capacity, the number of them you need, who would we be defending against, and how would we say that without getting up their nose? Why can't we have, for example, an institution double, triple the size? You know, actually, the model. This is my last comment. The model that we have in our heads for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is the one from England. So it's the Colonial Foreign Office, and the Colonial Foreign Office has attached to it MI6 and trade. As I mentioned, the resources that the British have accumulated over the years. Well, we can abandon that model and use the Russian model or the Chinese model, which is so successful diplomatically that they've established 54% of the world's population and 34% of the world's GDP into an area called the BRICS in 10 years. Anyway, that's my last comment. That's what we can do.
Somebody else? Good question. Sorry, put the hand, I didn't see a hand. Right.
I don't know if this is unrelated to what you've been talking about, but what do we do about our consumption on the planet? Can we keep consuming what we're doing and growing? How? Well, we'll have to stop growing and stop increasing our consumption somewhere along the line.
Well, I can answer that in two ways. You know, the Western phenomenon since the Club of Rome in 1864, they're causing themselves headache over overpopulation. Every single Western nation doesn't have population they can't repeat themselves. Every single one. Ours is 1.7. The worst is South Korea with 0.7 per woman. That is in 3 generations they're kaput. So it's bullshit. Get it out of your head. The nicest thing you can have next to you is a person. The next comment is that quality, discretion as to the quality is important. My grandmother had a few things that she kept all her life since she married. What's wrong with doing that? It was a cultural phenomenon then and can become a cultural phenomenon now. You don't have to, I tried to learn it, to get done, those things you put on the end of your finger so that the needle when you're darning doesn't, a thimble, I tried to learn it, I'm not going to learn it, I'm out of that, I'm going to buy a new pair of socks. But the attitude that you can repair stuff. My car's 22 years old. The van I drive around in is 19 years old. My son Gabriel, he's got an old bomb car, and if any of his friends buy a new car, it always comes up in discussion. You know, I bought a new car. As a criticism, as a commentary, an implied criticism of their capacity to make the proper value judgment. That's cultural. We don't need laws to do that. There weren't any laws that we had to down the stocks. It was cultural. So that's, you might, I hope that's a comprehensive answer. So,
Any other?
How do we act independently with so many bases in Australia, American bases like
well, to start with, start with the foundation of the problem, our sense of insecurity. We piss ourselves every time we think of our sense of insecurity. We wet our pants. Forgive me for using those sort of analogies, but Australians are frightened people. We're frightened with, I was going to say good reason. We're frightened because we do have something of immense value and we don't feel that good about the way we got it. Well, those two things can be repaired. One is that if there's some problem with the way you've got something, you just go fix it up. You don't abandon your project altogether because you're a human being and you can't. The only way you can abandon that project is go down. So you fix it up. If it's uncomfortable, the way you got in, the way you hold the stuff, the way you got the stuff, you fix it up and invite those into the tent, under the shade, and talk to them. And you say, well, we ought to have a treaty obligation with you guys because you were a mob that had a bit of a hold on the place, and we came along so we can talk this out. What do you want? And this is what we can give. It'll take 15 years, but we're still in here in 15 years, damn it, we're not leaving. Simple. So that's one way. The next is to find a better way of expressing your insecurity rather than inviting the United States here to look after you. Now, people say there's 100 or let's say 20 American bases here. They only come because we want them here, because they have sufficient control over the place as it is. They don't need extra bases. They don't need 5,000 soldiers in Darwin. They don't need that. They already control the place. We want the 5,000 soldiers in Darwin as a trigger line. We ask for it. We manipulate it. And then we say to the public who don't feel comfortable with this, the Americans wanted it. They asked for it. They insisted.
what about the pushback when Whitlam was, this Pine Gap? Like there was Nation Review covered it, involved the Newgate Bank, Doug Anthony renting his apartment to a CIA agent in Canberra. Like there was a massive retaking of Australia when there was a new mention of letting go of the Americans.
I have immense admiration for Gough Whitlam, and he's now in the pantheon of gods of Australia, and we hold him forth before ourselves as an example of what we expect from an Australian politician in relationship to Australia. Our independence is built stone by stone. It's built within us. Anthony was an Australian. He lives just up the road. Okay. His family been here forever and a day. So it's clearly within us. It's not the Americans' fault. Although making the Americans feel insecure is our fault. Because we must learn this, that the powerful do as they can. The weak do as they must. We are weak, but we can build an independent Australia that will reindustrialize. It's a great opportunity now because the American aura of capacity has faded. They don't even know how to reindustrialize themselves. One of their great thinkers, Thomas Merton, said, a wonderful man said, that it is not possible for a society to reindustrialize twice. To industrialize twice. It's not possible for a society to industrialize twice. Take that thought, as all thoughts you do that come to you, put it in water and see what it means to industrialize, and try and remember the images of men making railways with pigs, sleeping in. I used to go to school in Bathurst. It was a 6-hour train journey from, I don't know why they sent us away, they must have liked us out there, I don't know. Anyway, they sent us up to Bathurst. It was a 6-hour train journey. Along the way, there were the fettlers, what we call fettlers' camps, okay? Fettlers' camps were children, wives, and the men would go to work, and the camp would move along, and it would move from Sydney to Bourke, and then go to the other side and go from Bourke to Sydney. That's industrialisation. They crack the rocks with hammers. Now we have great big machines that crack the rocks. It's called ballast. Ballast must have 3 flat sides, okay? And it has that phenomenon so that it can drain water away but still be strong. Ballast. They made it by hand, whack, 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 like that. Nowadays we make it by machines. Well, what I'm indicating to you is the phenomenon that the culture must produce men and women who are willing to take upon themselves those jobs of work and fulfill them. We complained, of course. The women on the fettlers' camps, in order to reduce to kill bugs, insects, to purify the sheets, they boil them. We'd see the boilers as we go. My grandma had one. Boil the sheets. Poke with a stick, and then there was a technique. You get a piece of dowel like that. You pick up the sheet from the approximate middle. It's red hot, it comes out of boiling water. Then your companion puts another stick down the bottom somewhere, and you have a big twist up to twist the water, the hot water out. And then you dip it in cold water straight away, and you put it on the lines. And the lines used to be long strings like that, and you had a stick with a notch in it and push it up. When I was a kid, they used to come around the streets selling those sticks that because they wear out and break. But the point I'm trying to make is that culture has to prepare within itself the people who are willing to take upon themselves with enthusiasm and devotion the building of a nation. Whitlam tried it. He introduced Australian novels. How we are and how we can see what we are is through art, film, painting. All of it he introduced and subsidised so that we know what we are like. It's really important to know what you're like, and consequently, full of admiration for the work of your ancestors, upon whose shoulders you stand at this minute, on your mum and dad and your grandma and great-grandma, all of them. The multitude that's underneath you this minute that holds you up, and you admire them for it. And this gives you strength. To love gives strength. To be loved gives courage. I'm sorry, I seem to have missed my calling as a priest.
That's how we did the washing in the old days.
Thank you. Thank you all. Question from Dan.
Coming back to Australian notions of sovereignty, independence from America, makes me think of the AUKUS deal,
Yeah.
and whether we have, any major politicians that would be willing to challenge the AUKUS deal now, but also what position that would put us in Australia if we did challenge it in terms of maybe it might be, trade Pacific partnership agreements and things like that. Whether we could get sued or something like that.
Yeah, that's another good question. It requires a bit of thought. First of all, face the reality that $368 billion that we are giving to the Americans is tribute. Okay. It's tribute. We are paying them for protection, or better said, we are paying them not to smack us, not to hit us. We pay them a lot, heaps. Not only that, the Northwest Shelf exports as much gas as the United States. The Northwest Shelf of Australia exports as much gas as the United States and Qatar. Qatar gets $29 billion per annum. Australia, the same amount of gas, gets $800 million per annum.
Traitors.
It's gone on for 15 years.
Yeah, traitors.
So we pay. We pay through the nose. We bleed pain back to AUKUS. A Yasm class submarine cost $1 billion. It's better than the Virginia class. Russia made 8 of them for $9 billion. It's absurd. The whole thing.
And we borrowed the money from America to do it, often. So it's like a circular thing, because we don't make our own proper money. We just end up being deeper and deeper in debt, and then more and more in hock, don't we? And it's like we've...
How the arrangements for the provision of money is a tone. It would be another arrangement, but to practicalities. The United States is 6 years behind in its submarine production.
Yeah, they never...
6 years behind. They intend to produce 24 more SSGNs, Virginia class, a new class of submarines, 24. Russia's aggressively building its Pacific submarine fleet. So it'll be more than 6 years behind. So we'll never get them.
We'll never get them.
It won't happen. What will happen is that as each Virginia class submarine is decommissioned and replaced by a new one in America, it will be sold to us in the same way the smelters from Kaiser Aluminium were sold to us as new smelters back in 1960. It'll be the same story, exactly the same. The other thing will be that as these submarines are taken up, the interoperability that Richard Marles rabbits on about will come into force. That is, we will provide the operational staff, the sailors, the submariners for the second grade fleet of Virginia class submarines, which will patrol to our north and threaten the strategic lines of communication of China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and so on. That will make us really, you can imagine, red hot popular with our neighbours.
We might have time for one more question or comment from the mob.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, well, IPAN, which is the Society for Prevention of Nuclear War, worth joining. They've estimated that 37% of Australia's heavy industry, banking, serious industries are owned by the Americans. About 15% are owned by English, which includes a lot of land in the north, and about 3%, 4% by the Chinese. So, that's a big leverage, really, they've got over us. Not in many ways, not just that they protect us, but that they actually own us, and we think that we must pay them interest. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, having those figures to hand is a good starting point, and lets you know what you've got to do, and you don't. And as a consequence of that, you begin quietly to establish the institutions and the understanding that this situation is detrimental. It's not good, and it's not going to, it can't last. So you begin to build. 15 years ago, Julian's name was Mud. In female company, you couldn't mention his name. They just say he's misbehaved sexually. 15 years ago. Well, we started work 15 years ago. The Department of Defense in the United States, Department of Justice in the United States, Department of State in the United States, the White House, Hillary Clinton, in the United Kingdom, the Colonial and Foreign Office, the Prime Minister, in Australia, Prime Minister Gillard and her crew all said that Julian was a stinker, and so on and so forth. That was 15 years ago. Well, we started work. It was just me, a couple of others, and it grew and grew and grew and grew to the point where, as Australians, as a unity of Australians, the United States and the United Kingdom surrendered their position and returned to us the son of our soil, Julian Assange. I wouldn't be put off, but it's a job to do. And the figures that Liz illuminated for us describe what the job is. Now, the United States ain't going to be king of the hill forever, but Australia's going to be here forever. So you can start now, just this minute, by changing your attitude to the United States and its voice. Don't let them frame every thought. That's what they do all the time. Do you support Hamas? Who gives a fuck about this? I don't care about Hamas. What I care about are the actions of people who kill children. That's all. I frame my own understanding. And I frame it as clearly as possible so that it becomes food for the soul. I don't wander around, like every day actually, they spread another narrative. I can't stand the narratives.
John Pilger said that most of those wars,
Most wars are promulgated by the media, and we allow it, and we believe it. So you say we're scared people because we read headlines. People believe headlines. They don't do their own homework and research.
I got an answer. I've got an answer.
Don't read them.
I got an answer. Look, Trump has rallies of 60,000 people, 50,000, 60,000 people. Okay. All the media hate him. They detest him. They spit on him. But at each rally, there's 20,000 reporters reporting the event. Sometimes there'll be at a 60,000 event, 35,000 people reporting. Beat that. You can't. That's why he succeeded. That's why we succeeded. I didn't care what the media wrote. In fact, if a herald rang, I was the only one in our gang like this. If the herald rang me up or the age rang me up, I'd say, I'm sorry, I'm in America at the moment, I can't do it. Because social media reporting, we'd have a meeting of 20 people, 10 of them would be reporting on their phones. 10 of them had 10 friends. That's 100 reporters we've got. And the Age are offering me an interview for 2 minutes where they ask me a difficult question and then write me up as being a dope. Why would you want them? It's us who have, it's us. What do you call it? Distributed systems. It's us who have it in our hands to make these cultural changes. Us, reported. You know, we said this. You know, Bridget Archer, a woman I like, lost her seat last night. She was embarrassed. She was a supporter Liberal. I liked her. But I was able to say, oh, sorry about that, Bridget. You were very helpful. Blah, blah, blah. I didn't have to go to the newspaper to say that I'm sorry, and the newspaper printed up in the book, and Bridget read it if she takes the Age or whatever. It's all horseshit. Honestly, it's here. It's a distributed system with immense capacity. The only problem it has, and we can solve, the engineers will solve that pretty soon, is that the distributed system in its gigantic flow of information is constricted at a point and then supervised. You call that Instagram, Facebook, Google, whatever. But the engineers will solve it pretty soon. The same way they solve the fact that we now have the capacity to communicate with each other, communicate our thoughts, illuminate our thoughts, and build a movement to fulfill our desires. Sorry, I've gone on a bit, but you know, it's a nice question.
It's really all right. Going on a bit is what we have to do because there's a bit to be done. So going on about it, it's hard. One of the first or second or third steps along the way. Look, thank you to both Johns for that being, I think, fascinating discussion. Lots of information, lots of insight, lots of inspiration perhaps as well. So for all three eyes in that. Yes, please. Please around. In the moment or two, just a bit of set up time. Stu Higginson, Member of Parliament, Greens Member of Parliament, standing in the wings.